This is Barry McGoff from the RedThreadX. We're here to talk about our Pluot report. This is our first quarter report, and we pull out information from things that are happening in the first quarter in the world. World Economic Forum, CES, South by Southwest, a lot of the data reporting from the large consulting agencies, and we bring together intelligence which is lateral. We bring together ideas that you need to pay attention to, that which may not be always obvious. And the predictive quarter is where we predict what we think is going to happen and what we need to pay attention to. So for this chapter, we'd like to talk about the mirror world. Back in 2019, Wired magazine had a really, really interesting cover article called Welcome to the Mirror World. What they postulated was that there would be a digital layer on top of the physical layer in the world everywhere. It was an article that was ahead of its time. It was talked about things like intellectual property. It talked about who would own certain places, physical places and digital places, who would own the rights to have a digital Yelp review on a restaurant that you don't own, things like that. It was talked about mapping and very, very pressing in every single way. We paid attention. What's interesting is that fast forward to 2025 and same magazine, MIT Technology Review, talked about the idea of automation and surveillance. So the idea of building a physical world went from a theory, will we have a mirror world to everything, to yes, we do, and what is it doing in terms of privacy? What is it doing in terms of surveillance? And what is it doing to worker productivity? So we're already starting to think about the implications of the mirror world when it was only, imagine, 6 years ago. Last year at South by Southwest, we put together a red thread, and our red thread was, what about the human? What is happening? Are we workers revolting? Are we going to go against artificial intelligence? Are we going to reject robotics? And so we really thought about the human in the loop a lot as we tried to pay attention to the red threads from 2024. This year, it's really about embodied AI. We've accepted it. This is a really, really good mind map where it talks about the nodes and connectors between different areas of AI, from security to personal computation, to AI software to developers, to what's happening with natural language processing and chat. There are tons of ecospheres that are working together to create a picture of the physical world through the sensors that are being put out there. And we're building models to map the physical world so that we can start to use this data to actually create what Wired magazine talked about before, which is the mirror world. Amy Webb at South by, from the Future Today Institute, she put out her 1,000-page trend tech report. And one of the things she said when she talked about embodied AI and physical AI is that she predicted that the shift to action-based AI will create autonomous systems that can execute complex tasks without explicit programming, transforming automation across industries, and that it would be 125 billion connected devices by 2030 that would be giving us continuous feedback and fueling these large language models and these large action models that are continually learning. This is the future realized of ambient computing that was put forward by Mark Weiser at Xerox PARC in 1975. We're starting to see that sensors being smaller, faster, lighter, and cheaper are allowing the ability to map our physical world. At South by, MIT Technology Review does every year they do a very, very good readout of their top 10 technologies. This year, number 5, robo-taxis. So things like Baidu, Waymo, Zoox from Amazon. These are all automated taxis, and MIT Technology Review is saying it's here, it's a top 10 technology for 2025. The other one was fast learning robots. How are robots learning the physical environment, and how are they aiding what we're doing in our daily life? And what is the rise of robotics? We're going to talk about that. One of the things that's fueling the ability to learn about our physical world is synthetic data. Synthetic data, if it's something that you haven't heard about, is the idea for us to create models where we can forecast what-if scenarios so that we can say for financial modeling, for political modeling, for societal modeling, for population modeling, we can run multiple forecasts and then run what-if scenarios off of AI. Synthetic data is actually a really, really important part of us being able to have those large language models turn into large action models and learn faster. Because large language models are already being trained on all the existing data that we have. How do we get more data? We create it. We start to build model and forecasting situations where we can start to learn faster and become more accurate. One example of using synthetic data is NVIDIA Cosmos. At their GTX conference this year in March, they had an incredible launch of all their technologies. One of the ones that they talked about was Cosmos. And what it refers to is a world foundation model. What they're doing is they're building an environment where coders and programmers can come in and build physical worlds and then experiment inside them. So for instance, you want to be able to model what happens with a robot in a warehouse. You want to model what happens when you have an autonomous vehicle going 80 miles an hour around a blind curve. You want to be able to model and predict what happens without that truck crashing, without that robot knocking over shelves of inventory. So what they're doing is creating these safe spaces to model the physical world so that we can become more accurate using synthetic data. Archetype AI, and I will play this video in the background. We can play it now.
Have you ever wondered if the universe has a secret language? What if we could crack that code? Imagine an AI that can learn how the world works on its own, just by observing it. Will it reach the same conclusions about reality as us? Or will it discover something entirely new? We trained an AI model on hundreds of millions of sensor measurements, enabling it to experience the physical world firsthand, including power grid demand, atmospheric pressure, hydrodynamic flows, and more. We call this model Newton, a physical AI foundation model.
To test if Newton had learned to characterize general physical behavior, we tasked it with predicting the behavior of systems it had never seen before. We started with elementary physics experiments. Newton could accurately predict the future behavior of classic mechanical systems, even chaotic behaviors. What was surprising is that the same Newton model was able to predict very different types of physical systems, not only mechanics, but also thermodynamics and electromagnetics.
Discovering basic physics is the first step. Real-world systems are much more complex.
When we used real-world electrical grid data, we found that Newton was able to predict both electrical load and demand, which could be key to preventing blackouts. We also found that Newton was able to predict sunspots, which could help to mitigate their interference with communications infrastructure. What was most exciting to us is that Newton, just by observing the real world, had learned to characterize complex real-world processes, ones that we as humans could not even understand.
In healthcare, we work with an immense array of sensors. These sensors are all interrelated. If we could have one model to understand all of that, it would lead to an incredible number of new discoveries across all of medicine.
Today's industrial systems have grown in complexity and they will continue to do so. Maintaining and building AI models to enable efficiency and quality becomes incredibly challenging in that context. If there was one model that could learn physics, it would be groundbreaking.
Newton has uncovered how physical systems work simply by observing the world through sensor data. Has it unlocked a new way to represent physical reality? The answer will transform how we solve the world's toughest problems.
So Newton is run by Ivan Poparev, ex-Google. And he is fascinated, as you can see, by mapping the physical world. How will we create this mirror world? How will we create these layers if we don't understand how things happen in real life? Things that are random. And so you saw him doing randomized experiments on things like weather, wind, so that we can really understand how, when we operate inside this parallel universe, when we operate inside, then we know that we are solving for every eventuality. So at South by Southwest, Leo Giusti is part of the Newton team. He actually spoke on bridging human intuition and AI, and they actually are working with NVIDIA, working with Cosmos, and Accenture to be able to work with the city of Bellingham to try to figure out traffic patterns on intersections to lower fatalities. That's what happens when we start to use things like archetype to map out our physical world. We talked about autonomous vehicles right now, but we can see the rollout of Waymo. Waymo is now in Austin, DC, and it's going to be rolling out into Los Angeles now. They're literally a poster child for physical AI as we see it executed into our daily lives. We also seeing in the predictive quarter an explosion of human exoskeletons. So at CES we saw Hypershell, they have their Carbon X. We can see that Arc'teryx is working with Catherine Zeeland from the Google X project to make something called Skip Mogo. Skip Mogo is an artificial knee that hikers, walkers, and backpackers can use to be able to carry bigger loads and to be able to enjoy the outdoors more often. Hurotics in Korea also has exoskeletal structures around your back, around your knees, and this is really to increase performance and to what happens with workers in environments, and also what happens in aging. Do we want to make sure that our aging population can still be ambulatory and mobile? So all these systems are not static robotics. These are learning machines that are learning your behavior, learning your body, and how to improve on your own musculature. They're not animating your body, they're learning with your body. We can also start to see that robotics are working their way into every aspect of our lives. Amazon has at least these 4 different platforms. Sparrow for picking and packing, Zoox, which you might have seen on the street, Digit, which is their humanoid robot, and Kiva, which moves packages and shelves around the warehousing environment. And Kiva's been around for at least a decade. They estimate that there's over 750,000 robots in current operations, and if you receive an Amazon package, there's a 75% chance that a robot touched it. So we're also starting to see these humanoid robots start to work their way into reality. These are 2 things that were launched in the predictive quarter in February and March. One is Boston Dynamics Atlas, and you can see that it's break dancing. It's not sort of robotic, you can say. And then figure 2, which we talked about in one of our other red threads, is the idea that we're going to have humanoid robots that are going to that have digital accuracy, that can work alongside of us, that never tire, that always work, and they're much more reliable and believable than before. And in fact, Boston Dynamics said that the convergence of advanced sensors and AI will increase robotic autonomy by over 60% in the next couple of years. So we can start to see that physical AI will definitely include robotics. Clone is doing something very interesting and maybe a little creepy, as you can see from this, but they're actually working to have a highly accurate digital perception with robots that mirror our human nerve structure and our musculoskeletal structure. They have hands that have over 1,000 artificial muscles and 500 sensors, so that they can start to do very, very detailed tasks. So Clone is something that is actually in beta right now, and as of January 25, you can actually pre-order these for next year. If you want one, you can go onto their site and check it out and get a clone robot. We're also starting to think about agency in terms of robotics. Mint Robot actually showed at CES, And their idea was not just have robots, but how do you make sure that you can use agency to monitor one robot, to monitor the effects of all other robots so that they don't crash into each other, so that they're efficient, that they work quickly. So it's almost like one robot to rule them all. They're building agency software that depends on agency to be able to run these animatronics through physical spaces. We're also seeing the rise of biological robots. So you can see here a couple of interesting examples. One is on the left-hand side, there's a jellyfish. They're actually putting robotics on jellyfish to be able to use as deep sea sensors. Jellyfish are actually very interesting idea around how to build biology and chipsets together. A jellyfish can go down thousands of meters. It's not susceptible to the pressure or the cold, so it's not going to explode. You don't have to monitor it, and it can take ambient temperatures wherever it goes. You're also seeing things like artificial skin, which will be going onto things like clone robots, that will be able to animate in terms of sort of smiles. This one's a little bit more of a grimace, but you can start to see that we're developing the ideas around the technology around biological sensors and biological robotics. And these systems are constantly learning. You can see on the left, this is a Lego optimizer where you can take your phone and you can point it to a pile of Legos and it will tell you what you can make out of that pile of Lego parts. So a little bit fun. Also, we can start to think about the physical world and in terms of what we're doing with drones. There's a lot of conversation right now about drone technology, drone warfare, but also drones in agriculture. This is actually a huge unlock because if you're thinking about large industrial agriculture, big ag, these are big plots where you can't see everything. But if you can have a drone go and sense crop health, you can sense where you have pesticides sufficiently or over-applied, you can test irrigation, water levels, then you can actually start to manage your crops a lot more efficiently and increase crop yields. So when these physical environments are constantly learning, they're constantly learning the things that we want you to learn, things that are positive for society. There are also things which maybe are a little bit more nefarious because they're also constantly learning. They're constantly learning about you. Axelera has AI security that is what they call unconstrained facial recognition. So it's not anonymized, it's not GDPR compliant. It looks at your face and says, I know your name. You're Barry McGoff. You walk through this turnstile. That has tremendous implications for political free speech, security, and you can start to see that companies like SenseTime, MEGV, Viso AI, they're using facial recognition and image detection in public spaces that can identify bag, dog, person, warning, right? So they're using optical character recognition to be able to identify what's happening in public. Elias AI is using the physical environment in different ways. They have actually an olfactory digital drug sniffer where when you walk through those tunnels, it will smell whether you have drugs on you or not. Could be a good thing, could be maybe not a good thing. So we need to think about the negative implications of AI systems that are constantly learning about us in the physical world as well. So we like to end every chapter of our red threads with what are the implications? What's the so what? Why do we need to care about all of this? Why do we need to care about embodied AI in the physical world? Well, there's some implications we need to think about. Just a few weeks ago, there was a backlash of taxi drivers in China because they are afraid of losing their jobs because of automated taxis, because of Pony and Baidu. That's interesting. So those are the implications to society. Will we all have a partner bot that works alongside of us, helping us with our work, monitoring our work? Have to think about that. Will we start to see more and more biological robotics? We'll talk about that in another red thread in deeper depth. The answer is yes. but what are the implications as we blend biology and compute? Will we get to a place where jobs are so imperiled and taken by robots that have taken over the physical space that there are no jobs for us anymore? Will governments be forced to impose a universal basic income? Will we use robotics and embodied AI to get better medical outcomes? Do we need to think about the assault on privacy, especially in this day and age, in these political environments? Will we be able to use embodied AI to improve food security? Will we get into a world where people will pay for surveillance as security and surveillance as a service? This is actually a picture of a camera embedded in a rear-view mirror that's connected to an insurance agency that is ready to charge you more when it watches you drive dangerously. So will we have surveillance as a financial product? Will we use physical AI to replace humans? It's very interesting to think right now when we think about childcare and elder care and how we're starting to trust AI as the #1 use case of how AI used in 2025 is building relationships and emotional advice and psychological advice. Will we trust robots with our kids that are infinitely patient? Will we trust AI and robots in the physical environment with our elderly? Will we be able to use the physical AI world and what we know and what we can surveil to have better outcomes to mitigate climate change? These are the so whats that we can imagine when we start to pay attention to this particular red thread. There's a lot more that we can talk about, so we can share with you some of the documents from Archetype AI. There's a great blog by Brad King called Living Intelligence, Arrives at South by Southwest. This is one of the keynotes. I would welcome you to read the original 2019 article, Welcome to the Mirror World by Kevin Kelly, who's now a luminary in the futurist space. And there's a great article by McKinsey called The AI Revolution Will Be Virtualized. We invite you to read about this more if you're interested. As always with the RedThreadX report, this is our call to convergence as we think about how we move from a plum to a pluot. Are we going to be better? Do we improve when we do that? And we know that some choices around us we can make, some we should make, and some are being made for us. It's up to us to determine which we choose. Thanks.